And so if past is true, then we're going to look for past meetings. So we do meeting, and we use a dynamic finder, find all by meeting date less than. The dynamic finders can have extra qualifiers on them, like less than, greater than, less than equals, greater than equals, in list, different things like that. So again, this is a method we never had to write, and it will generate a HQL query for us if we don't have to write either. So we're going to find all the meetings that are with a date that are less than the current date, and we're going to set the max to be the max from up here. And we're also going to sort this list on this property of our object. So we're going to sort it on the meeting date property, and we're going to sort it in descending order. Okay, if past is not true, we want current and future meetings, then we just do find all by meeting date greater than or equals to. So this is a qualifier that you can add on to there. Here's the property name, meeting date, and this is the find all by. These find alls can return a list, not a single object. Okay, again, we just use the current date, and the max and the sort. The default sort order is always ascending, so we need to specify it here. All right, once we have our list of meetings, we're going to write out an unordered list. Then we're going to loop through our meeting list using the Groovy each method. Each is the iteration method that's added to all collections in Groovy. We're going to loop through that, and we're going to assign the iteration variable to meeting. If you don't put anything in here for this, then the default iteration variable is it. And I don't really like it because it's not very meaningful. So, put it back. And then for each meeting, we're going to write out the list item tag, and then this here link is actually the same thing we saw on some of our other pages. We saw, I don't know, here the glink tag. The glink tag creates an anchor. It's the basic a href equals blah blah. The anchor, the href part is figured out by your actions. You can also set controller and ID, so that'll build the URL for your href, of your anchor tag. Okay, so that tag can also be called as a method. All Grails tags, including the ones we write, can be called as methods inside of Groovy code. So we're going to call the glink tag using just calling it as a method. So we call link, and then instead of attributes or arguments, so controller, meeting, action, show, and just named arguments. Okay, so that's going to create a link inside the list item, and we're going to close the list item. And the body of the link is going to be the meeting's topic. So it's just going to give us a list of our meetings by their topics, and then there'll be links that you can click on to go to the meeting. So that right there, we just created in those 20-something lines of code. What happened? We just created a custom tag. Now, right now it would be G meetings, and I don't want to use G because that's the default for the Grail stuff. You don't want any clashes, so we can do our own namespace. I would always recommend doing this in any tag library you create. Give it a namespace, and we're going to call ours UJUG. Okay, so now to use this, we're going to open up our index. That's index.gsp is, it's right here, the root of our views is index.gsp. This is our home page. This one right here, that's index. So we're going to replace some of this stuff. We'll just replace this top block up here, application tabs. We'll replace that with our meetings tag. So this view, this page is a bunch of CSS stuff, which we can ignore for now. Here's this part. We're going to replace this stuff here. Okay, so let's replace with these 4 lines here. Just a header for upcoming meetings, then we're using our UJUG meetings tag. So, we're saying to count to 3. Then the past meetings, instead of count to 3 again, this one past equals true. So those are the attributes that we're looking for in our tag, so it's reading out of there. Pretty simple stuff there. And now if we run this, we refresh it. Oh, it wasn't running, I should have already created that scrap. If I had opened another console that I could have created the tag while these were running, it would work. Most things you do in Grails you can do while the app's running and just refresh and see your changes. There are a few exceptions, but most things work that way. Okay, so now it's back to running. Now we see our tag here. So these values here were put out by the 2 custom tags we just created. And they will make you expect them to work. So that's how we did. It's kind of a trivial example, but that's just to show you how easy it is to create a custom tag. And I use these a lot. One thing I use before is to avoid things like using G-each or using G-if. Grails comes with some handy tags like gif, gelse, gelse if. I try not to use those in my code. I try to keep, when I see that, I start putting logic in the page. So instead of trying to build a custom tag, that there's a logic to spit out the result. Even just in the basic stuff in here, like in the create view, for example. So you have all this stuff, all these TRs. You have a TR for every property, and it's got these two TDs in it, and it's the same thing for each one of these. All that's different is the name of the property. So I would often turn, there's actually a plugin that does this for you now, that just turns all these into single tags. So just have a tag for each property will show it, the label and the input, and all you specify is the property name, the object and property. That's all you really need. The rest of this is all fixed. So tags, like using tags like that can really keep your pages. You can see how these pages are kind of hard to read and navigate. They're very verbose. That's kind of a complaint about GSP and JSP pages. But Grails custom tags are so easy to create, there's no reason not to just make a bunch of them and use them to keep your pages much cleaner and neater. Okay, so that's custom tags. Next thing I want to show is URL mapping. By the way, if there's any questions in here, you guys can shout them out as we go.
Question?
Oh, there we go.
So how do you style your page? What's your development process of the right CSS? You can't just open your GSP?
Yeah, well, actually the CSS that this is mostly using is down here in the web apps CSS folder. And there's a main.css which comes with Grails, and this has all the default Grails CSS in it.
So how do you do style in the browser using Firebug?
Oh, me personally, if I have to work with CSS, I would use Firebug usually to see what I've got, and then I just change it in the text editor. I don't do a lot of that. I usually, most projects I've worked on is someone else who handles the CSS and JavaScript stuff.
Are there recently
The IDEs, the IntelliJ IDEA and Spring Source Tool Suite both have good GSP support. I don't know if that, I think IntelliJ IDEA picture includes WYSIWYG stuff for a lot of their page things. Alright, so next we're going to show is the URL mapping. So we saw earlier how we can navigate the thing with this mapping scheme here. So the app, the controller, the action, and the ID. That all happens because of the default mapping that Grails comes with. Controller, action, and ID. So the controller and action and ID, each of these are variables. So you have the $sign in front of them shows these are variables. So they're going to be parsed out of the URL, and they're going to be assigned to the controller variable, the action variable, the ID variable. Those will be in the params. So you saw earlier in one of our pages we have the controllers. We do params.id. That ID value would be in the params map. Those things we went into in Groovy, those are from the Groovy. Groovy maps support a dot notation. So you map.key gives you the value. So params is a map, a hash map, so the params.id key will give you that value. Okay, so the values are parsed out of the URL and placed into those variables in the map, or items in the map. And that's the standard Grails mapping. But you can create your own mapping. And I've got one I wanted to show you real quick. So we're going to create some special custom mapping that will allow people to find our meetings by the month and the year, rather than having to know the ID of it or having to rely on a link already existing. So we're going to call it details. I'm putting a literal in here because if you don't put any kind of literal for your custom mappings, it's really easy to clash with existing mappings because you can't tell what the names don't mean anything. It's all positional. So we start off with a literal to give it to zero it in on our mapping. It's all just simple matching here, pattern matching. So we'll find the details, and then we'll put the next two values will be month and year. There are variables, and they're required. So these ones here, action and ID, have a question mark at the end. That means they're optional. Controller is required. Action and ID are optional. So if you do juggler/number, it works. If you do juggler/number/list, it works. If you do, juggler/number/show/3, that works. It goes on down the line. In this case, these are both required for our mapping to work. Now, since we don't have a controller action in the URL, we still need a way to tell the Grails book control the action we're going to. So we're going to put them in there directly through in here. So inside this mapping block that gets created, we can set any of these things. We can even set IDs too. So if we wanted to, let's see, who was her? Scott's number one speaker. Okay, so we can make a mapping down here. And we set the controller action. We can set all the values there instead of you have the static mapping. Now we should be able to bring it right up that way. Yes. So what's that?
Can we use this for our site when we're done?
Sure, right. Actually, this is a kind of simplified version of what I used to use in the user group I led in Madison. All right, so this one. So for this one to work now, this is going to call the show action of our meeting. So we're going to have to modify the action a little bit for this to work now. So let's open up our meeting controller. The controllers, by the way, are all here. Actually, up here. Meeting controller. Okay, so the show action normally just is a real simple action. It just defines a variable here called meeting instance, and it assigns it the value of the get. So our meeting.get is using the ID. So normally you get to it by juggler/meeting/3 or 1 or 12 or whatever it is. All right, so we're going to just change that. So all we did here was to declare the meeting instance by itself to start off with, and then we're going to check the params. We're going to say if params.year, and remember the Ruby truth, if it's null, the value is false. So if we call a key on a map that doesn't exist, it just returns null. So if the year is not in the params, then this will be null. It'll skip this and come down here and do the normal thing. So this is just what we already had, just get with the ID. So we know there's only two ways to get to this. Either our new mapping or the traditional mapping. The traditional mapping will have an ID. Our new mapping will have a year. Okay, so there is a year we fall into this block. We're going to just use a different method of getting our meeting. And we're going to call this method we have to create called find meeting by month and year. It sounds like a dynamic finder, but it's not. Grails isn't quite that smart to break up a data apart in month and year. So we're going to do that for it. So we'll just create a simple method. Well, too much time on what the method is doing. It's basically just refining the month of our meeting for us, but it's just using a calendar. And then I'm doing a list of all the meetings. And we wouldn't want to do this if we really large data sets. I'm pulling back all of them and then filtering on the client. Well, on the server, but not a database. So I'm doing this find method. A find is added to all Ruby collections as well. And what it does is it runs through the whole collection and finds the first one that matches the criteria inside the closure. So it's kind of like each, or it iterates over it, but it's doing matching as you go. So we're basically getting the month and date on the calendar, and we're going to just compare them. So if the calendar a year equals the params that year, and the month equals the params that month, then that's a match. And it just finds the first one. We only have one meeting month, so it should work fine.